Hello, my name is Alicia M. Morgan, and I am here today to talk to you about how I use empathy mapping to save a school partnership. The photograph that you see on the right of this presentation is of a young man and myself at a museum education event. You can see he's very attentive, curious, and engaged as I watch on. Ideally, when it comes to partnerships and collaboration, you want people to be curious, engaged, and active and attentive. Now, sometimes things can feel like they're falling apart. However, through empathy mapping, you can re energize the partnership. And that is what we're here to learn today. Some background about myself. I am an aerospace and industrial engineer who's worked in aviation and defense. I also have executive leadership experience as a vice president of education and programs at an aviation museum, and I am PMP and Agile Metrics certified. As you go into a new organization, you must go on listening tours. It gives you a sense of what's going on and helps you figure out what will be the best leadership style for that environment. You're also building trust. You're uncovering some blind spots that the job description may not have told you about. And you also want to honor the culture as it is as you plan for making shifts to make it better. As I mentioned earlier, this particular presentation is going to be about my experience as Vice President of Education and Programs at an aviation museum. I had direct reports. One was a museum school programs manager, as well as a museum public programs manager. We had part-time educators. There were museum volunteers that would help out with our school programs and tours. There were also many volunteers who would come in periodically. We had corporate partners. We had educators who would come in. So there were a lot of moving pieces. So you're always on this listening tour to figure out what's going on. Now, why empathetic leadership? Over 76% of people interviewed for research says that having an empathetic leader makes them feel more engaged. And also in a people first environment, we want to make sure that we're not only saying as leaders, I feel you, I feel for you, but you want to ask the question, how can I help? Empathy mapping. This is a very resourceful tool given to by the PMI, Project Management Institute. So there are a series of questions that you ask when you're doing empathy mapping. The questions are, what do you see? What do you think and feel? What do you hear? What do you say and do? From there, you identify the pain points, the fears, the frustrations, and the obstacles to get to the gain, the great partnership, the wants, the needs, and the measures of success. Now, the problem statement, as we talked about earlier in this museum education environment, we had an initiative. We were in our 4th year. We had some grant funding for 3 years. We were in fear of losing that funding because we weren't meeting all of our outcomes and measures. And we had a partner school who was a part of the initiative from the very beginning, was slowly not as engaged. So now, how can we find out what was going on? I decided, so my team can continue doing all the great and amazing programs, that I would go on a listening tour and have a discussion with the principal of the school. I arrived and I can sense some apprehension or resistance from the principal to tell me what was really going on. This photograph, I love using Microsoft tools. So I use Microsoft Copilot and Designer and came up with this photo as I asked the generative AI to come up with a photo of students disengaged end a STEM activity. So you can see people look bored, irritated. We have some young adults that may be educators in the background or older students, and they all look really bored. And this was the feedback that I received from the principal. Our programming used to be fun, but now the students and the educators find that it's not as fun as it used to be. So what can we do about that? The next thing I asked was, what do you think can fail? Well, the principal said we have too many options for programming. We have a lot of nonprofit partners. Corporations are coming directly and not working with the nonprofit. And myself and my STEM coordinator feel like this partnership is now one-sided. You're saying that we need to participate in your programming, but why? Why should we now? And as always, when you are working with a value proposition and you're selling your service or how it helpful or being impactful as a nonprofit and mission focus, is how do you maintain the student interest and how does your programming meet with the education standards? And what do we hear? The STEM coordinator was telling the principal that this partner is too demanding. We have all these things that we have to do during the school day. We have new testing. We have students that are going through all these different activities and they're just getting burned out. And the program is not exciting. It's kind of boring now. And this communication, although frequent, is not seeming as helpful as it should be. And what do you say and do? Again, we're saying we have this grant funding. You should work with us. And they're like, well, so what? We have to remember that as nonprofit partners or collaborators in general, when you have some information, you can't just say to someone, I have some money, just work with me. It's more than that. And then you want to make sure that you engaging with them to really understand and how their needs may have changed. And they gave us some comfort in saying, hey, we can participate, but not in the same level, because we have this grant funding that says we have to have multiple engagements. At that time was five or more engagements. We wanted the majority to be at our location, but now that we're shifting, and this was pre-COVID, we want some of this to be at our school. We want some on-demand opportunities to look at your content or virtual. And then we have some STEM nights after school. Can you come in and provide some STEM education that? So there were a lot of options and moving pieces to take into consideration. Now I go back to our team and say, hey, I visit the partner and I'll go and visit other schools. And they said, like, are our goals realistic and expectations? We had this grant funding. We wrote this proposal several years ago, but now is it still working? And of course, our team was not happy. They're like, do you mean we have to come up with new programming? Do you know how hard that is? This partner stopped responding to us. Why did they respond to you and not me? It was all that. And then, did we miss something? When we take surveys and do assessments, was this information in the assessments and that we moved through it, didn't look at it because we had all these demands of our time. So we want to make sure that we are looking at our assessments and surveys. Survey says, like, there were some places that we found out that the engagement wasn't as expected. Now, our team action plan, we decided that we would do more frequent reporting. So we would send reports to our funders and corporate partners to let them know how things were going. And this would include not just the quantitative data, but qualitative data. Like, what are they saying about what we're doing? And schedule regular site visits. And that would include myself going to these schools as well. And communicate ahead of time to funders, hey, we may not get the outcomes that we expected because they have shifting priorities at the schools, and here's why. So it's okay for things to change, but you want to communicate that regularly and early as often. And then be very agile, as we know. Most importantly, we decided to have a teacher advisory council. Now, when we come up our programming and ideas, how can we figure out, does it really align with the standards in our interpretation versus a teacher's interpretation? So to have some educators give some insight on what we're doing, we found that very beneficial. As a result of all these moving pieces and doing this empathy mapping, we had some success, some measures of success. We became CNN certified. So that includes our data management and how we capture data. It was recognized that we do an excellent job, and we had a third-party organization come in because we believe we're great and we capture our data, but we want to make sure that we weren't trying to game the data to tell a story that we wanted, that the data actually said it and we had some integrity behind it. Now, we talked about earlier the state standards and making sure everything aligned. So we worked really hard in going through all of the standards and getting certified by the Texas Education Agency. We experienced growth from doing all this empathy mapping. We went from serving 35,000 to 45,000 students, and that was remarkable. And within 2 years. And then, of course, we got more grant funding. Now, as we went in and we found out the perception of what we were doing, it was very hard for our team. But as a result of all of this due diligence, we got multiple grant year funding. Now, I need to go back here. Some leadership insights. We did our change management program. We got more team buy-in and more board support. We had some greater partner engagement, some data management, as we talked about being certified, and then communication, our monthly newsletters, social media, volunteer engagement, all those great things happened. Some key takeaways. I had to go back. I was jumping because I wanted to get to this in that slide when I went back. But our key takeaways, because I was so excited. These photographs, again, I use Microsoft Copilots and Designer. You see all of that smiling faces and excitement. Well, that gets us back to where we started in the first slide with that young man who was attentive, curious, and engaged. And this is excitement. This is where we want to be. And that shows how empathy mapping can get a partnership renewal because we understand their shifting needs. We're checking in with them. And we always asking, how can I help? That important question. Remember, this excitement is where we want to be. Now, I hope through this presentation, I have shown you how I use empathy mapping to save a school partnership. So please like, subscribe, and share to AMMorgan here on YouTube. If you have some feedback on how you use empathy mapping and you found it very resourceful, please leave a comment. And again, stay curious, engage, go on those listening tours as a leader. It shows how empathetic you are and how willing you are to move from just empathy and including to compassion. I wish you the very best on your empathy mapping journey. Thank you.